Did you want to mute yourself?
I did.
Okay.
All right. Welcome to tonight's workshop. Dr. Maya Kinzigler of Monarch Family Chiropractic. And if you have your head tuned into anything healthcare related, you've heard the term microbiome, but it's really looking at the diversity of our microbiome, specifically our gut. But as you'll find out, we are more bugs than cells. And so our mouth has its own microbiome, our skin has its own microbiome. So it's really looking at the healthy diversity of microorganisms that make us up. And tonight I really want to get into details on why it's important and how you can support a healthy microbiome. So let's just go right here with this long quote that I'm going to read. You can follow along with me, but this is from Dr. Marcelo Campos. And he said, inside our bellies, we have an extensive intestinal lining covering more than 4,000 square feet of surface area. And when working properly, it forms a tight barrier that controls what gets absorbed into the bloodstream. An unhealthy gut lining, which AKA is called leaky gut, if anyone has ever heard of that, may have large cracks or holes, allowing partially digested food, toxins, and bugs to penetrate the tissues beneath it. This may trigger inflammation and changes in the gut flora being your normal, healthy bacteria, your microbiome, that could lead to problems within the digestive tract and beyond. And frankly, he says digestive tract and beyond, yet this is just scratching the surface of what we're actually seeing in terms of how important our microbiome is. But just let's talk about this component for a second, because we have this digestive tract whose purpose is to break down food that we're eating. And it starts with, how we first chew our food. And when we chew our food, we have this enzyme in our saliva called amylase that starts the breakdown process. And then it goes through to our stomach, and our pH of our stomach is very acidic, like 2 point something or other, that helps break it down further. And as it makes its way through the digestive tract, if you think about, your food as, a string of pearls, by the time it gets to our intestine where those nutrients should be absorbed, it should be broken down into one pearl. Okay. And if we have any type of stress along that process where food isn't broken down, number one, it can cause a challenge with how things are absorbed. But when we have this unhealthy gut lining, this leaky gut, that means that there's cracks or holes where you get a string of pearls that are getting through to, into your blood, and your body doesn't really recognize strings of pearls. And so it really is a trigger of your immune system saying there's stuff in the blood that shouldn't be here. Let's take care of it. Let's attack it. And that's where you get that inflammation. So Dr. Tom O'Brien, I took some of my info from, can you see that? The Autoimmune Fix. He's a functional med doc. He's a chiropractor. He teaches a lot of functional med courses to all people in healthcare, and he's written some pretty fantastic books. But he was asked in the Autoimmune Fix, what's the one thing you would do more than anything else if you were going to focus on being healthy? And he said, focus on creating a healthier microbiome. Nothing is more important to the function of your body. Nothing has more control. Nothing impacts more of your tissues and organs than the microbiota. It is the big kahuna. And I tell you, for a chiropractor to hear that, it's like, ooh, are you sure that's more important than the brain? Right? Because what do you hear from us? The brain is the first organ to form in utero. And from the brain came every cell, organ, gland, tissue in the body. And your gut is really called, it's your second brain. It's your enteric nervous system. When you hear about the gut feeling, when we're younger, we don't have all of this stress and influence of outside forces. We're more likely to follow our gut feeling. But there's a thing to that. But here's this little box here. For every message that the brain sends to the gut sends 9 messages back to the brain. So it's sending 9 times the amount of messaging to the brain than the brain is to the gut. So it is controlling our brain's response to stress, brain hormone production, the activation of the brain's immune system, the growth of new brain cells, and the ability to adapt new brain cells to learn. And so if we have a microbiome that is really unhealthy, it's called dysbiosis, but an unhealthy ratio of good bacteria to bad bacteria, it creates an influence in terms of that messaging. And they've, pointed, have pointers to like physical conditions as it relates to unhealthy microbiome, as well as mental emotional components, anxiety and depression and those sorts of things. So let's go to Dr. Axe and what he said in terms of just looking at how important your health is as it relates to the gut. So I want you to first go to this lower box here, that lower row. It says, our bodies are more bacteria than human. There are 10 times more microbes than human cells. Think about that. Because what are we taught to believe? Bacteria is bad. Clean it up, bleach it, get rid of it. And I'm telling you right now that your microbiome and the good bacteria are so vital and so important. I mean, Dr. Tom O'Brien says it is the most vital thing, the most impactful thing when it comes to your health. And if you are thinking that bacteria is bad and I need to get rid of it, and I need to, every time I walk around, spray myself with hand sanitizer, use bleach and soap, what are we consuming in terms of how it impacts our the internal microbiome? What are we putting on our skin? What are we putting in our mouth to clean our teeth? And how is that impacting the flora of our bacteria? It all has impacts. More than 40 diseases have been linked to bacterial imbalance, including depression, arthritis, IBS, and cancer. The gut bacteria creates 95% of the body's serotonin, which if you look at how our healthcare system is addressing depression, serotonin plays a big role in that. But 70 million Americans suffer from digestive diseases, and it's costing the US $100 billion in medical bills. Your gut hosts between 500 and 2,000 species of microorganisms, bacteria, yeast, parasites, viruses. Are you guys getting the heebie-jeebies? This is all important. We just need to make sure there's a healthy balance between them. We can all understand this. When you get outside of a poor balance, that's when it becomes a problem. But it's all vital for the health of the immune system. 60 to 80% of your immune system is located in the gut. So let's go here. Let's start with the infant microbiome. How is our microbiome created in the first place? The first bacteria infants receive for their own gut microbiome is at birth from mom. That is if we are born vaginally. There's something called gulping. As baby moves through mom's vaginal canal, they take down mom's microbiome and gut flora. It's literally like they're taking it down, and that helps seed the gut. And then what happens is children are breastfed in an ideal scenario in terms of the lens of microbiome. And that breast milk helps, again, seed and create healthy flora for that child. When a baby has a strong, healthy gut, that means that it is loaded with a bacteria called B. infantis. And when you have heavy amounts or heavy volumes of B. infantis, it literally crowds out the bad bacteria. Well, with modern medical practices, antibiotics and C-sections, because if you are a C-section baby, you bypass that vaginal delivery, obviously, but you bypass that good, healthy exposure to bacteria. And they actually have, I wish I remember what it's called, but what some practitioners are doing is they're taking gauze, and it's called seeding for the baby. But if they know there's going to be a potential C-section child, they actually take gauze or some type of material, and they have mama put it in her vagina, and it sits for 2 hours or however long. And when baby is born via C-section, they give that gauze to the baby to suck on. That's a way they're bypassing or allowing for that baby to have some opportunity to receive a gut microbiome. So there's ways to get that. It's just oftentimes we don't know it. But B. infantis has slowly disappeared. Moms who didn't receive it at birth were unable to pass it on to their babies. And this deficit continues through generations because C-sections are becoming we're seeing those deliveries happening more and more. It's pretty significant percentage. So today, 9 out of 10 babies don't acquire this B. infantis at birth. And so when you have higher levels of bad gut bacteria, it's linked to increased risk of colic, allergies, eczema, diabetes, and obesity. So you can see at birth, if you aren't supporting a healthy microbiome, how it can impact you later in life. And that's where, if you talk to Doc or I, we really like to recommend, it's a very specific powdered probiotic for babies right away. It's just a powder. It includes B. infantis, but if you are a mom with a kiddo and you're looking for a probiotic for them, you want to make sure that this bacteria is in there. So what harms our microbiome? And you heard antibiotics and C-sections with, impacting our infant microbiome, but the use of antibiotics is like dropping a bomb on your microbiome. It damages and destroys everything in its path. I mean, it was designed to take out bacteria, period. And it's not selective. It's not like, oh, you're good and you're bad, I'm taking you out. No, it takes everything out. And if 70% of our immune system resides in our gut, then it's impacting our immune system. But what's it say? If the last 3 to 4 decades of antibiotic use has resulted in a systemic depletion of good bacteria from our intestines, you can imagine how this might impact how we are protected from colds, flus, viruses, or even cancer cells, right? And I mean, there's actually quite a bit of research around antibiotic use and how it impacts our immune system. But let me just pull this up here. Got something I'm going to just read from. Because there was a clinical trial done in the UK and Sweden, and researchers gave participants 1 of 4 commonly prescribed antibiotics or a placebo. And they checked on participants' oral and gut microbiomes right after the weeks of antibiotics, 1, 2, 4, and 12 months afterwards. And they found that the effects varied upon the antibiotics the person took, but generally oral microbiome, so your mouth bounced back pretty quickly. But what they found in terms of how the bacteria was affected in your intestines was disturbingly negative. So depending on the antibiotic, the effects of a single antibiotic exposure on the human gut microbiome can be very aggravating and prolonged. And they see it prolonged even 12 months later. So one antibiotic use, if you talk to majority of us, it's very common to be used, antibiotic use. And a lot of us don't necessarily think of risk factors around how it affects our overall health. But I want to share this with you. Now, this is an old comparison study. This is from 1989. And what happened was that researchers sent out surveys to 200 pediatricians and 200 chiropractors because they wanted to see the differences between health status of their respective children raised under very different healthcare models. And I'm sure that you can imagine being a part of our practice, or if you've had chiropractic a part of your healthcare model for any period of time, chiropractors probably raise their children maybe differently than pediatricians. And I just highlighted, I have this, you can look at, they've actually outlined quite a bit of details around the different infections and things that kiddos experience with a pediatrician mom versus a chiropractic mom or parent. But the chiropractic children showed a 69% otitis media free response, while the medical children only had a 20% otitis media response. Why does this matter? Because most often children are given antibiotics because there's an ear infection involved. Okay. Pediatricians were more likely to feel that every child would have been on a course of antibiotics at least once. And some suggested that almost 100% of children suffer from otitis media, whereas many chiropractors reported that their children had never been on an antibiotic, and the occurrence of infectious disease was significantly less among the chiropractic children. I bring this up because we've got Dr. Tom O'Brien, who's saying you need to address the microbiome, period. It is most important. And if you are really adopting a lifestyle that honors the innate intelligence and natural life, it's going to be compounding for years to come. And this is just one example. And I bring this up because we know and understand the importance of an infant microbiome. But if you are getting adjusted, you are supporting a healthier brain-body response. You are helping take stress off of the brain. You're taking, addressing the inflammatory stress on a system overall. And that body is going to be more receptive when you do choose to make healthier choices around, creating a healthier microbiome. So, microbiome, supporting a healthy microbiome through diet and nutrition. Dr. Tom O'Brien says it can happen pretty quickly in terms of bringing more balance to your microbiome, but it has to start with your diet and how you consume foods. And you'll see that huge highlight that I have, high fiber. You can't miss it. Choose colorful, high fiber fruits and vegetables. This is showing up over and over. We need to have fiber to help move, the body move through the gut. But choose colorful, high fiber fruits and vegetables. They're found in brightly colored fruits, and vegetables have incredible health benefits that affect our microbiome. And we need to really choose the right types of carbohydrates. If we're consuming processed carbs, ultra processed foods, like chips, French fries, I'm not sure what reeds are. What's that? Breads. Breads, thank you. Typo. I'm glad Paige is here. Breads, white rice, cookies, crackers, desserts, and sugars. If we're consuming a lot of that, it's not supporting a healthy microbiome, which is not supporting the messaging that happens to our brain, which is creating a leaky gut situation, which is allowing bigger stuff to get through, which causes inflammation, immune response, and a cascade of effects. A lot of times, if you think about if a leaky gut is where the problem's coming from, but we're in significant pain and we're seeing, hormones dysregulated, and we're getting diagnoses. That diagnosis is downriver. That uphill impact, or that that downflow impact, leaky gut up here, that waterfall, that's the problem. We're trying to address it down, miles down the river. We got to start addressing it in terms of a deeper issue, if that makes sense. Grass-fed, red meat, and healthy fats. Now, this is on there because we're finding when you're consuming red meat and healthy fats, it doesn't have the impact to the gut lining that these other food types do, like these processed foods. It really kind of cracks and breaks into the intestines. They're finding with meats and fats that doesn't have the impact in our gut lining. And eat 1 forkful of fermented food every day. That's kimchi, that's sauerkraut, kefir, pickles, kombucha, tempeh, miso, apple cider vinegar, yogurt. Because most probiotic supplements contain fewer than 10 billion, in terms of dosing of microorganisms. One spoonful or forkful of fermented veggies can contain up to 10 trillion. Okay, so you can get a lot of bang for your buck here. And the idea is to rotate. You want to get a lot of exposure to lots of different microorganisms. I worked with a functional medicine doc who was out of North Carolina. And he said, I was in California last week going surfing. He was like, I was swallowing that ocean water by gulpfuls because I wanted to give my microbiome lots of exposure to stuff that we don't get exposed to in North Carolina. And I thought, well, that's an interesting thought. So you want to expose yourself to lots of different microorganisms, create a lot of diversity, because when you create more diversity and diversify that gut flora, it impacts your health in a very healthy way. So supporting a healthy microbiome in terms of supplementation. Now, probiotics, Dr. Tom here in Autoimmune Fix, he really talked about, probiotics and really understanding them it's really in its infancy. We don't really totally understand. A lot of people think you take a probiotic and that's what's seeding the gut. But what I've read is that when you take a probiotic, it changes the environment within that gut flora. So it's not necessarily seeding your gut, it's changing that environment along that pathway to help, again, support the good, healthy bacteria that's there. But it works to balance immune function and decrease inflammation by helping maintain a healthy environment within your gut. It helps heal intestinal permeability, that leaky gut, and it's most effective when combined with high fiber diets. So lots of vegetables. So if you're really looking at, man, I'm going to take a probiotic, that's gonna, be the miracle supplement to do it. You've got to do this in combination with how you're consuming and feeding your body. And when you're choosing one, you really want to choose one that's broad spectrum. It has an array of microorganisms and it's high potency. So the packaging should include the strains, the CFUs, the colony forming units. Typically, if you see something in, a store, it could be anywhere from 5 billion all the way up to 100 billion. Some that we have access to go up to 250 billion. I mean, you can get high dosing here. Should say suggested serving size, health benefits, tell you how to store it, and should have some contact information. So you want to make sure you're getting a good quality probiotic if you're purchasing this. If you are taking an antibiotic, this is, in terms of Doc and I, we believe that it is important to help support your gut, period. So for sure, you should be taking a probiotic and highest dosing that you can get as possible. You're not going to take it at the same time as an antibiotic. You're going to stagger it. So if you take your antibiotic in the morning, you're going to take that in the evening, your probiotic, and you're going to finish it through, typically antibiotic is 7-10 days. You're going to finish it through and maybe get another probiotic to support that for the next, 2-4 weeks. Again, understanding that, one antibiotic can impact your gut, not only 1 month out, 12 months out. Another supplement that is recommended is a prebiotic. Now, a prebiotic is not for you. The prebiotic is for the probiotic. It is food for the bacteria in order to help them function. And oftentimes, if you're doing a gluten-free diet, gluten doesn't have a lot of prebiotic components to it. And so it can create some dysbiosis or stress to your microbiome. So if you are strictly gluten-free, it's recommended you would do a prebiotic probiotic combo because you're not getting in your diet. Chocolate, I like this. Chocolate is considered a prebiotic. And a little dark chocolate every day can increase your intake of prebiotics. And what Dr. Tom O'Brien recommends is just take a square of very dark chocolate, 70% or more, place it under your tongue, don't let it touch your teeth, and let it sit there without chewing it and allow it to dissolve for about 2 minutes. And he says this can really be satisfying. And not only that, it can stimulate the production of endorphins, which are 200 times more powerful than morphine in how they stimulate the feel-good sensors in your brain. If you need 2 squares, go ahead and take 2 squares, but you want to make sure it's high quality. The other thing I'd like to just share before we finish here is that your microbiome is contagious. Meaning, the people you spend a lot of time with, you know, roommate, family, you guys are sharing your microbiome. And so, you know, it's that quote that the 5 closest people you spend your time with, your 5 closest friends are a reflection of your financial health or where you can end up in terms of, you know, success, whatever that outline is, health, career. It's a reflection of that. Well, we see that with your microbiome. So when you start making these healthy choices, you want to support your family or the people you spend your life, a lot of time with are making those similar choices because their choices impact you, which is fascinating. And then it makes sense as well. So I end with that because I am really appreciative that you choose to show up here on Tuesday nights. It is really honorable to show up consistently to help nourish your mind with information that will hold you accountable to doing what's most right for your health. Because what you do today is impacting, you know, the trajectory you're on for 30, 40, 50 years out, which for some people is really hard to think about. But don't worry, we got your backs. We're thinking about it. And we want the best for you. So that's where I'll end is if you know somebody who doesn't know what you know about chiropractic, we ask that you share it with them, whether it's through a workshop, bring them in. You know, you're not here to get out of pain. You're here because we are helping support your education so you can live a different life. And we want that for everybody. We live in a really unhealthy, you know, city, country. We need help. We can't do this alone. And there's people out there who need help. So I ask that you share what you know. So the worst thing we could hear is somebody in, you know, their 60s saying, why didn't somebody tell me about this 20 years ago? Or somebody in their 40s who said, why didn't they tell me about this 10 years ago? I could have changed the health trajectory of my child that I gave birth to 8 years ago because I had to go into an emergency C-section, whatever it may be, right? So I love and appreciate you. If you have questions, bring them in. Happy to talk about microbiome. Happy to give you resources. And we'll end there. So Dr. Mayakin, Monarch Family Chiropractic, and we'll see you when you're in the office. So thanks for being here.